Welcome to my channel, KetoMealsAndRecipes.com. I realize I don't often make bread, although I have made two different versions of buns and my walnut bread, which I consider more of a treaty part of a meal than just a bread. And the reason I don't make bread very often is because even clean and healthy, nutrient-dense versions of keto bread have a fairly high number of calories and carbs. So it's a trade-off in how you use bread. However, today I'm really happy to share with you my new bread recipe, which uses a different kind of nut flour that is much lower in carbs, which I will explain later. And this is my pecan bread, which is also an excellent keto, gluten-free and sugar-free sandwich bread, and lower carb than most. Before I continue, I want to mention, if you would like some sandwich ideas, please watch all the way to the end of the video. And I want to have this disclaimer right up front, that all of my bread recipes and in any of my baking, I never use vital wheat protein or filler ingredients like recently trending bamboo flour. You might as well be eating sawdust, or expensive ingredients such as egg white powder. Except for the egg white powder, most of the other ingredients are very highly processed and, in my opinion, are not clean ingredients due to how highly processed these sorts of ingredients are. Also, in this video, I will be showing you a new loaf pan I'm using that makes this bread soft, moist, and have a nice soft crust, perfect for sandwiches. So please keep watching for more details. Now, the macronutrient ratio for the pecan bread is 2.2 to 1, with 7.2 grams of total carbs, 2 grams of soluble fiber, and 3.2 grams of insoluble fiber, resulting in only 1.9 gram of net carbs per slice of bread. Before beginning the recipe, I want to explain the benefits of pecan flour. There are several advantages to using this pecan flour in some recipes, not all. The sweeter taste of pecans is the first benefit, so it's excellent for recipes where you want the results to be a bit sweeter, like in muffins or certain types of bread. The other benefit is that pecan flour has relatively low carbs, both total and net, compared to almond flour and coconut flour, as you can see in this chart. Lastly, pecan flour is simply ground up, dry roasted pecans, and pecan flour is a natural ingredient with good nutritional value, unlike trendy, highly processed, and dare I say, expensive so-called flour substitutes that some people are promoting as keto, low carb, or gluten-free. In general, my philosophy is to keep the ingredients as simple and natural as possible, and almost entirely whole food based. I also want to show you this Japanese-style bread loaf pan. I'm going to be using this pan because it has a lid, and that keeps the top of the bread from burning. And it also has steam holes at the bottom, which prevents the bottom of the bread from being wet and soggy. Okay, enough of this diatribe. Let's get cooking. Begin by preheating your oven to 400 degrees Fahrenheit or 200 degrees Celsius. Next, get a fine mesh sieve and place it over a mixing bowl to which you add all the dry ingredients. I begin by adding my pecan flour, the coconut flour. Then I lift the sieve and add my whole psyllium husk because it won't pass through the sieve. Replace the sieve and add the gluten-free baking powder, baking soda, and skim milk powder. With a fork or spatula, stir to sift the dry ingredients. When you're done sifting, you may notice you have some coarse ingredients left in the sieve. Just toss these into the bowl. The purpose of sifting is to aerate your dry ingredients. The next thing you're going to do is sift your ingredients to combine them very well, and then just set this bowl aside for a moment. It's now time to whisk the egg whites to a medium stiff stage. The added egg whites will help to make your bread lighter and a thicker, nicer loaf. Then fold from the bottom, flipping into the center, and do this until the egg whites are incorporated with the dry ingredients. But please don't overfold. You don't want to deflate these egg whites. This is important for the fluffy lift to the bread. Now pour in your boiling hot water to a measuring cup and also add your apple cider vinegar and then give it a light stir. Pour the boiling water and vinegar solution into the bowl. This will activate the baking soda and baking powder. And then immediately fold the water into the dry ingredients. I found that using a spatula worked better than a whisk. At this step, also fold just until all the dry ingredients have been combined with the hot water. Again, it's important to not overfold because that will deflate your bread dough. Then immediately scoop and transfer the dough into a well-greased loaf pan. You don't need parchment paper for this loaf pan. And you also do not need to shape the dough. Just gently place and distribute the dough throughout the pan. And what you're doing is actually just layering the dough. To even out the surface, you can either wet your fingers or use a spatula, then very gently even out the surface of the dough. Now you can either pour or use a pastry brush to coat the entire surface of the dough with your melted butter. The next step is optional, but I like to sprinkle the chopped nuts over the surface and then gently press them just to embed them so they don't flake off when the bread is done. The last assembly step is to make a 1/2 inch or 12 millimeter deep diagonal cut into the surface of your dough. These cuts will allow the water vapor to escape from the inside of the bread as your bread is baking, resulting in the center of the bread not being so wet and soggy and baked more evenly. Now glide the lid onto your Japanese style bread loaf pan and place this loaf pan in the middle position of your preheated oven and set your timer for 40 to 45 minutes. When the timer goes off, the bread may be done, so test the loaf with a toothpick, and if the toothpick is dry, the bread is done. If it still comes out wet, give it 5 more minutes, then turn off your heat. You have 2 options here. You can leave the pan in the oven with the door ajar to let cool for 20 minutes, or you can leave the bread in its pan with the lid on your counter for 20 minutes. Remove the lid and run your knife around the perimeter to loosen the loaf. Then flip the bread out of the loaf pan and turn it back right side up so that the walnut side is up on the cooling rack. Then just let the bread rest until it is completely cool to room temperature. To serve, I recommend that you cut the bread into 1/2 inch or 1.3 centimeter thick slices. This bread is wonderful just with a little dab of butter, or you can use it to make your favorite sandwiches. What sandwich you make, of course, is your personal preference, but for this pecan bread, I prefer a milder and sweeter topping, such as my keto Nutella or one of my reduction jams. But if you want a meat sandwich, ham and a mild cheese such as brie or soft mozzarella or some other favorite mild cheese are excellent options. You'll find that even though this bread is fairly light, it's still filling on its own, and especially filling if you use it as a sandwich. Any leftovers can be stored in the regular way you would store keto breads, either on your counter in a sealed container or in your fridge. If you're storing it in the fridge, be careful that it doesn't get too moist. I hope that my pecan sandwich bread will be a tasty and useful addition to your low-carb, keto, gluten-free, and healthy lifestyle. I really like hearing from you, so do give me feedback on what you would like to see on additional videos, and if there are any questions that you have about my recipes or how to stay on a low-carb, keto, gluten-free sort of lifestyle. I'd sincerely like to thank you for taking the time to watch my video. I really appreciate it. Please come back when I post my next video. Until you visit my channel again, have a happy and healthy day. Cheers!